Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Let me start with an interview I did with Bruce Whitfield with South African radio station Radio 702. That link is on the front page of the website rich.co.ke, and I was talking about a number of things, including extreme concerns about coronavirus making landfall in Africa, and I've already explained that I think it's been here for a while, just not diagnosed, I was just explaining that I thought that would hit our economy across the continent, and then on top of that the violence of the reversal of the China-Africa feedback loop phenomenon, which has been positive for 20 years and now is in a violent reversal, and also touched on the argument between the World Bank and the African Development Bank, the downgrade by Moody's of Nigeria, of the IMF of Nigeria and Moody's of South Africa. Macro thoughts, Chinese renminbi remains poised to depreciate versus the dollar, says T Commodity. He's saying it broke and held above the bullish flag. This was from yesterday, though we've had a little bit of a better performance today, and we are currently just below 7. I personally think they're going to do everything possible to keep it around these sorts of levels. And as I said on the 13th of August, it remains the most important currency to watch right now. And at that time, I had not factored in the viral impact because I had not predicted it, unlike a book I've seen which predicted it 2 decades ago and even gave it a name, Wuhan 400. The important point to note, and specifically with respect to that feedback loop phenomenon, and Germany as well is caught up in the crossfire of that. So it's emerging markets, Germany, frontier markets, obviously Asia. China is much bigger in the global economy now than during the SARS epidemic. It is also much bigger in the financial markets, and this analysis is from J.S. Blockland. Home thoughts, I return to Here We Go Round the Prickly Pear. Prickly pear, prickly pear. Here we go round the prickly pear at 5 o'clock in the morning. I saw that William Dalrymple is leading a trip down the Ganges next year with Steeps Travel, and this is the photograph they're using to promote it. He's a fantastic writer. I haven't read his latest book, and I look forward to getting my hands on it. Professor Galloway, nice shot of New York, indeed. This is a shot from C.S. Dickey of Paris, France, Cubist Louvre. Here we have Orion over the central Bohemian Highlands, one of the most identifiable star groupings in the sky from our cat door. It took me back to Rumi, we come spinning out of nothingness, scattering stars like dust. The door to hell. In 1971, Soviet geologists were drilling in the Turkmen desert when the land gave way beneath them, leaving a 70-meter wide, noxious gas-emitting crater. They ignited the gas to try to burn off the excess, but the crater has been ablaze ever since, which I thought was quite remarkable. And that took me back to, it certainly feels like a decade of semiotic arousal when everything, it seemed, was a sign, a harbinger of some future radical disjuncture or cataclysmic upheaval. This is the first moving picture of a solar eclipse captured by a British magician turned filmmaker more than a century ago in 1900, it has been rediscovered in the archive of the Royal Astronomical Society. That's from Rainmaker 1973. Political reflections build the wall. This is in India, where a wall has been built so that President Trump doesn't have to see a slum. And that took me back to the 2nd of December when I was writing about the politics of ethnocratic nationalism. Past is present. Resistor Cis20 posted this photograph, one of Hitler and one of President Trump. And for no good reason, it took me back to my favorite piece in Ecclesiastes, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things, yet to be among those who come after." The Bloomberg campaign is hiring experts on malignant narcissism and comedy writers to get into Trump's head and push all his buttons to make him even crazier. Utter genius, that's Spiro Agnew's ghost. And I thought to myself, that's probably the optimal strategy. China's coronavirus death toll hits 2,000. That's Bianco Research. I wrote about it over the weekend, and I still am highly skeptical of the numbers because of the linearity with which they're being presented. This is lethality charts using the Johns Hopkins time series data. That's from OSINTHK, a useful resource. And you can see there again, there are 4 data sets there, all of which are very relevant. A study estimates 86% of all infections were undocumented prior to the Wuhan travel shutdown on January 23rd. That's via Anil Vora 69. Study estimates 86% of all infections were undocumented prior to the Wuhan travel shutdown, which explain the rapid geographic spread of COVID-19 and indicate containment of the virus will be particularly challenging. We estimate 86% of all infections were undocumented prior to the Wuhan travel shutdown. Per person, these undocumented infections were 52% as contagious as documented infections, and were the source of infection for 2/3 of documented cases. Our estimate of the reproductive number 2.23 aligns with earlier findings. However, after travel restrictions and control measures were imposed, this number falls considerably. Conclusions: a majority of COVID-19 infections were undocumented prior to implementation of control measures on January 23rd. And that also should be seen in the context of what University of Toronto researchers show, which is that the epidemic started 1 month earlier than commonly believed in November 2019. 7th of October, I said the world in the 21st century exhibits viral, wildfire, and exponential characteristics and feedback loops which only become obvious in hindsight. And then I came across this from R. Zong Notes. I cannot reiterate enough that the World Health Organization is doing an inspection tour of China's treatment of COVID-19 and skipping Hubei. The Korea CDC says the 31st confirmed coronavirus patient came in contact with 166 different individuals. All of these people have now been quarantined rover 829. Just 166. And that's why in my first article I said viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics, and I'm sure there's going to be a non-linear and exponential infection from that one individual. China's coronavirus figures don't add up. This never happens with real data. A statistical analysis of China's coronavirus casualty data shows a near-perfect prediction model that data analysts say isn't likely to naturally occur, casting doubt over the reliability of the numbers being reported to the World Health Organization. A quantitative finance specialist who ran a regression of the data for barons, a near-perfect 99.99% of variance is explained by the equation this person said. Put it in an investing context, that variance, or so-called R-squared value, would mean that an investor could predict tomorrow's stock price with almost perfect accuracy. In this case, the high R-squared means there is essentially zero unexpected variability in reported cases day after day. It's simply not possible when something is multiplicative, exponential, and non-linear, that it would have such a linear formula. I have never in my years seen an R-squared of 0.99, Goodman says. As a statistician, it makes me question the data. For context, Goodman says a really good R-squared in terms of public health data would be 0.7. Anything like 0.99, she said, would make me think that someone is simulating data. It would mean you already know what is going to happen. At this rate, the number of deaths from coronavirus could exceed the Kivu Ebola outbreak by the end of February, Natasha Loda. It is amazing that a boat in Japan now has more official coronavirus cases than any city in China outside of Hubei Province. 542 cases on board the Diamond Princess, Stephen McDonnell, is more than Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, Wenzhou, etc., etc. Yes, I know official figures are flawed, he says in brackets. Officials in Japan say that of the recently confirmed infected cases on board the Diamond Princess, 65 were showing no symptoms of the coronavirus, and that's an important point, asymptomatic. Results show that if as low as 20% of infected persons are asymptomatic and can transmit the virus, then even 95% quarantine efficacy will not be able to contain the virus. What a figure, virus incidents outside of China and the impact of one cruise ship. That's Dr. Eric Ding. This mega assembly of God Church has now been linked to a 21% cluster virus whisperer. Then 40 such mobile trash and animal carcass incinerators have been sent to Wuhan. Each has a capacity to process 5 tons of trash and animal carcasses daily. That's Jennifer ATNTD. What is really getting burned and how many, she asks. I take you back to that Reddit article, which I am not vouching for, nor do I know what it really is, whether it's magic realism, literature, but it is part factual, I do believe. And in that he describes coming to an enormous furnace with great fires roaring within. And then I take you back to Intel dot wave. Current SO2 levels are extremely elevated, at 1700 UG and M-3, where 80 UG is considered dangerously high. Andreas Steno, what is going on? Air traffic down almost 60% compared to Lunar 2019. Road and rail traffic down 70% or more in some areas, and yet a big spike in the 30-day moving average of air pollution in Beijing. If you haven't read that article by Professor Zhangrun, Viral Alarm, When Fury Overcomes Fear, please do. It's very powerful and speaks to how a rigid and frigid system and hierarchical system, it fails in its response to a non-linear exponential type threat. Hubei doctors warn of even deadlier coronavirus reinfection causing sudden heart attacks. It's highly possible to get infected a second time. A few people recovered from the first time by their own immune system, but the meds they use are damaging their heart tissue, and when they get it the second time, the antibody doesn't help, but makes it worse, and they die a sudden death from heart failure. Reads a message forwarded to Taiwan News from a relative of one of the doctors living in the United Kingdom. The source also said the virus has outsmarted all of us, as it can hide symptoms for up to 24 days. The CT scan shows both lungs are fully infected, but the test came back negative 4 times. The 5th test came back positive. Notably, one of the ways coronaviruses cripple the immune system is via an HIV-like attachment to white blood cells, which triggers a cytokine storm. We've seen evidence of both sudden collapses and neurological damage from footage pouring out of Wuhan, China. Returning to that article about which I'm not vouchsafing, he says, to put it in a more direct Western manner, they started to melt. Now we've had a third major leak from XJ, a detailed list of Uyghurs in re-education. This is China Cable's unprecedented insight into the minutiae of Xinjiang's internment drive. Returning to Reddit, it needed a great number of human guinea pigs. 2 groups were identified for this. First, we rounded up a large number of so-called Islamic radicals in Xinjiang province. I've written about Xi Jinping and his algorithmic control. 21st of October, I said, unless we're now going to Xinjiang the whole world, the current modus operandi is running on empty, but I stand corrected because 10% of the world's population is now quarantined. BBC World, row 598, contains the case of a 38-year-old woman with the first name Helcham, sent to a re-education camp for one main reason: she was known to have worn a veil some years ago. 5th of March, I wrote about how China has unveiled a digital panopticon in Xinjiang. Adrian Zentz, who's being attacked by one of the Chinese newspapers, has written a piece, The Karakax List, dissecting the anatomy of Beijing's internment drive in Xinjiang, Journal of Political Risk. The Karakax List lays bare the ideological and administrative micromechanics of a system of targeted cultural genocide that arguably rivals any similar attempt in the history of humanity. Driven by a deeply religio-phobic worldview, Beijing has embarked on a project that ideologically isn't far from a medieval witch hunt, yet is being executed with administrative perfectionism and iron discipline. Let's move on to the markets, and let's start off with currency markets. Euro, very weak yesterday, is back at 108, the figure. Dollar index strong at 99.44. Japanese yen softening 110.11. Swiss franc 0.9834. The pound is at 13004. The Australian dollar 0.6700. India rupee 71.4975. South Korean won 1188.45. They've been very negative and they're going to suffer from that negative feedback loop. Brazilian real back at a record low 435.66. Egyptian pound 15.6143. South African rand 14.96. This is a dollar index chart from JS Blockland. We're at 99.44 and continuing to strengthen. Euro dollar at 108, and I think we're headed towards parity. Gold, which had a banner session yesterday, is currently at 16.05. And as I said, on the 13th of January, given the uncertainty I've outlined, gold looks well underpinned. Might even have a banner year. Then on the 27th of Jan, I said markets bought gold and G7 bonds as investors dived into safe havens. Next week, we could see these moves turn parabolic. Crude oil has been firming and was down quite sharply yesterday before rebounding to close unchanged, 52.77. I thought this was a chart of Tesla, but nope, it's palladium. The metal is currently trading up 5% at 2,769 per ounce. That's from Nick Kunze 2. Have a look at this chart that Paul Wallace posted. Here's the performance of some African countries this century. Not great figures. That's the understatement of the year. Look at those numbers. It's a bloodbath. It was a pleasure to meet with the Angolan President João Lourenço today in Luanda. That was yesterday. The US strongly supports Angola's anti-corruption, democratization, and economic reform efforts. That's Secretary Pompeo. Lindsey Graham tells the Defense Secretary Esper he could make your life hell in battle over Trump's Africa policy. Trump is seeking to dial down troop levels and is meeting a lot of resistance. At one point, Graham warned Esper that there would be consequences if the Pentagon withdrew all troops from the region. Graham told Esper that he could make your life hell, according to 4 people. Graham has met often with Trump and was a key supporter during his impeachment, and he has repeatedly criticized Trump's administration initiatives to remove US troops from crisis zones. The Sahel region is a huge expanse of western and north-central Africa just south of the Sahara Desert that extends from the Atlantic coast of Senegal across the continent to the Red Sea coast of Eritrea. Graham told Esper that he should be able to find roughly $50 million to fund the deployments in the more than $700 billion of overall defense budget for the fiscal year 2020. Several members told Esper that leaving would abandon a key US ally, France, whose military has been leading the fight against terrorists in the region, while the US acts in a support role. The members told Esper that both French and African partners are worried that the US could suddenly abandon them as well. I give the French credit for what they've done in Africa, particularly in the Sahel. They've been the real leaders. They've been reaching out aggressively to get more European partners on board with mixed success. And I fully support that effort, Esper said. The review is widely expected to result in a cut in the number of US troops in Africa to counter China and Russia elsewhere, with emphases on sending more US troops to the Asia-Pacific region. Last month, Graham and Coons co-authored a letter urging Trump not to withdraw US troops from Africa. They have about 7,000 troops in Africa, more than 5,000 of them based at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. Any withdrawal or reduction would likely result in a surge in violent extremist attacks on the continent, the letter warned. withdrawal would also abandon our partners and allies in the region. In their letter to Trump last month, the senators said the Sahel and the Horn of Africa were ripe for US engagement. 20th of January, I was saying, in fact, from the Maghreb to the Sahel to the Horn of Africa, we're witnessing a surge in asymmetric warfare. 2nd of December, when France suffered its biggest loss for about 20 years, and Salif Keita released a video on his Facebook page in which he tells President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita to stop subjecting yourself to little Emmanuel Macron, he's just a kid. That was on the occasion when 2 helicopters collided in the dead of the Malian night. Macron then asked some serious questions of West African leaders as to whether they wanted French support. And of course, you've got a more muscular Russia. I wrote about that on the 28th of October from Russia with Love. Russia said it was going to be a different kind of superpower, one that does not engage in pressure, intimidation, and blackmail to exploit sovereign African governments. Our African agenda is positive and future-oriented. We do not ally with someone against someone else, and we strongly oppose any geopolitical games involving Africa. So it looks as if Trump would leave the African stage to the Chinese, the Russians, and others, but he's getting pushback. Pompeo, I'm confident that we can get the right force posture, the right risk for the United States, and still deliver on peace and security that is important for the region. General Stephen Townsend, head of US Africa Command, last month testified that the US would have to coordinate with the French and other European allies on any change in the American troop posture. He also admitted the terrorist threat in Africa is very serious and on the advance. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the East African nation is expecting significant financial support from the US in order to back his government's reform program. He met with Secretary Pompeo in Washington on Tuesday. Secretary Pompeo is, I believe, speaking to the African Union right now. 2nd of July 2018, I wrote an article about Ethiopia rising. Zimbabwe's Venezuela-like currency extends its decline. The Zimbabwe dollar has weakened more than 20% this year on the black market to 28.7 per US dollar. The official exchange rate is almost 60% stronger at 17.7. Interest rates are at 35%. Only Argentina has a higher base rate at 44%. The economy is going to contract about 6% last year, and that leaves half the population in need of food aid. People have flown into the stock market, which has risen 69% since the end of 2019, and that's a hedge against currency depreciation. The country has suffered from a dearth of foreign exchange for years, and the crisis has only worsened since former President Robert Mugabe, under whom the economy began its decline, was forced out of power in 2017. South African All Shares up 1.1% so far this year. Dollar Rand 14.96. My target is 15.50. Egyptian pound, second best performing currency in the world, 15.61. EGX 30 down 2.33% this year. Nigeria All Share up 2.63% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange down 1.78% this year. Locust swarms ravaging East Africa are the size of cities. Bloomberg, this is David Herbling, and Habesh _ Mary Muthoni runs through a farm in Mathiakani in southeast Kenya, shaking a bottle with pebbles at the clouds of locusts that swarmed into her village the night before. We first woke up and prayed. We prayed that the Lord shut the mouths of the locusts, Muthoni said. Experts say the outbreak, the worst in recent history, is caused by an increased number of cyclones, If the weather trends continue, there may be more to come. There is a link between climate change and the unprecedented locust crisis plaguing Ethiopia and East Africa, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Warmer seas mean more cyclones, generating the perfect breeding ground for locusts. Today, the swarms are as big as major cities, and it is getting worse by the day. The number of locusts in East Africa could expand 500 times by June. That's the Food and Agriculture Organization. The region gets heavy seasonal rains and great locust breeding and swarming conditions from March through May. Last year, the October to December rainy season was among the wettest in 40 years, with cumulative rainfall ranging from 120% to 400% of normal. Insect dynamics have also shifted with climate change, according to Baldwin Torto, principal scientist at the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology. Just a single locust, if it comes into a farmer's field in the morning, by midday it has eaten the entire field. Locust infestation is the worst in Kenya in 70 years. In Ethiopia and Somalia, it's been 25 years since an outbreak of this severity. We do have a chance to nip this problem in the bud, but that's not what we're doing at the moment. We're running out of time. Politics, climate, and biology coinciding has allowed the formation of bigger swarms, said Bill Hansen. Look at this from Sindh via Parveen Kaswan, the local song in the background, saying how these locusts are eating up our till, our mung, our bajra. I saw footage from China. So you can see it's in a huge arc all the way from the Horn of Africa. I wrote about it when I said we're currently under a plague of locusts and Al-Shabaab attack on the occasion of that attack at the Manda Air Base. Exodus 10, if you refuse to let them go, I will bring locusts into your country tomorrow. They will cover the face of the ground so that it cannot be seen. They will devour what little you have left after the hail, including every tree that is growing in your fields. They will fill your house and those of all your officials and all the Egyptians, something neither your parents nor your ancestors have ever seen from the day they settled in this land until now. Luke 21:11, there will be great earthquakes and in various places famines and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. As I said, it certainly feels like a decade of semiotic arousal when everything it seemed was a sign, a harbinger of some future radical disjuncture or cataclysmic upheaval. 23rd of November 2015, I said, I cannot help feeling we're like frogs in boiling water. We have created massive interference in the cosmic fine-tuning phenomenon. 30th of September, the end is nigh, the feedback loop and the risks of dieback, where we enter a phase of cascading system collapse. European Union finance ministers added Panama, the Seychelles, Cayman Islands and Palau to the bloc's blacklist of tax havens. Others are Fiji, Oman, Samoa, Trinidad and Tobago, Vanuatu, and 3 US territories of American Samoa, Guam, and the US Virgin Islands. Public debt here in Kenya is up 240 billion shillings in 6 months to December. During the 6-month period under review, the government was under pressure to honour maturing debt with an option to roll over some of them, while revenue significantly fell short of target by 138.7 billion. The Nairobi All Share is down 3.33%, and that's the feature of that move is a weakness in Safaricom since they suggested they might be going into loan and finding some other partners other than Vodacom. NSE20 is down 3.89% year to date. I like this photograph from MVAV, shot using Nightscape at 7:28 in the evening. Amazing what phone cameras are capable of nowadays. That's of Nairobi around Westland. Thank you for listening.